Hey friends, and welcome back. Today I want to share with you how we're going to turn a few simple craft supplies into this super cute name banner. So let's go ahead and jump right in. To get started with this project, I've gone ahead and printed and cut out my pattern. I scaled it to 5 inches as my fabric is also cut to 5 inches, and now I am ready to get going. Now, if you're not feeling in the creative mood to design your own pattern or think up of the thread colors to use, I do have some pre-made patterns in my Etsy shop. Find these patterns in my shop on the left-hand side tab where it says custom name patterns. There you'll see a number of different name patterns. By the time you're watching this, there may be more, so feel free to check that out. But I'm going to use the first pattern here with the yellow flowers. Now inside each of these patterns, it comes with a stitch guide teaching you how to make the stitches, how to get started, as well as what DMC embroidery floss colors to purchase, and step-by-step, stitch-by-stitch directions so you never feel lost, as well as a custom template with the name already printed on it. So I'll leave a link in the description below if you're interested in getting one of those. For this project, I am using canvas fabric, which is quite a bit thicker than something I normally work with. Now, I chose canvas fabric because it's more sturdy and it'll be, I think, nicer sitting on the wall as compared to like 100% cotton, which might be kind of flailing around and you might see the threads more so through the back. So I chose canvas, and because I chose canvas, now I'm choosing to work with graphite paper. If I were to try and use a light table and a friction erasable gel pen, it would be really difficult to transfer through thick canvas fabric. So that's why I'm using this. Now you could also totally use like sulky stick and stitch paper, where you print on the paper, stick it on your fabric, and then you stitch, and then it dissolves after that when you dunk it in water. Either option would work great. Now here I'm just making sure my pattern is nice and centered and sitting where I like it. With this banner, I'm going to make a little loop at the top so that the stick can go through and the string can hang on that stick. So I'm just testing it out to make sure I have enough room, so you can kind of play with it. I just lowered mine a tad bit to ensure I have enough room up there, as I'm going to create some fringe later on, which you'll see in this tutorial. So once I have it sitting where I like it, I'm going to go ahead and start transferring. Now with graphite paper, that's super easy. You probably could have taped it down, but I'm a bit impatient and eager to get working on this project. So I just held things in place and I'm transferring it with a pen and I'm pushing down hard. Now one thing to note with when you're transferring with graphite paper is those marks are permanent. So you do want to make sure that you are staying in the lines here when transferring. Now this is totally optional, but before getting started with my stitching, I did go ahead and throw one more layer of canvas fabric underneath it. I do understand that thickens it up so it's a little bit more difficult to stitch with, but I just wanted to ensure this was nice and thick and sturdy, and I also wanted some more fringe on the sides. So I did it. I could have also probably used some sort of fabric glue, but again, I was just like eager to get stitching, so I just let the embroidery hoop hold these two pieces of fabric together to get stitching. On a previous one I did sew them together, which is also an option, but up to you, this step is optional. I do want to mention, since I printed my pattern to 5 inches and I had already pre-cut my fabric, a 5-inch embroidery hoop would not work for this pattern because the fabric would not be covering the entire hoop or be able to pull through the edges. So I did use a 3-inch embroidery hoop to stitch this, and as you will see, my design is a bit cut off on the bottom, but that's totally okay because as I'm stitching, I'll have to move the hoop around a bit to be able to complete the bottom. Now I'm done stitching for the day, and what I'm going to do is actually, instead of leaving this project as is, I'm going to disassemble it. So I'm going to take the hoop off of the fabric, and the reason for that is that I want to avoid hoop burn. And what hoop burn is, it's whenever you pull off your embroidery hoop after a project and you see this perfect circular outline of your embroidery hoop, and it's pretty much stuck on there permanently. Like, it really doesn't come out with an iron. Trust me, I've tried before, and so to avoid that, anytime I'm not working on my project, I take it off of my fabric and then I re-put it back on whenever I want to work on it again. So there's just a helpful tip for you to kind of avoid that giant circle that you don't want on your project. And now it's a new day, so let's get back to stitching. Now that we're done stitching, we're going to move into what I'll call the construction phase. It's at this time that we're going to turn this little piece of fabric into a super cute banner. So to go ahead and do that, I've gone ahead and flat ironed my project to help get rid of those lines so that I am ready for this next step. Now, I totally forgot to mention this in the beginning, but it's super crucial when using this canvas fabric. I cut it with the grain, meaning like the horizontal and the vertical lines of this fabric, the weaving of it, I cut it so that it was all horizontal and vertical, so that now I can pull these little woven pieces that make up this fabric apart to create what we're going to call the fringe here. So that's super important. Don't forget to cut your fabric correctly if you want this fringe on your canvas fabric. And to get that fringe, I'm just going to peel back the layers of this piece of fabric like it was a piece of string cheese. That's how we're going to achieve this super cute fringe look. So pretty much just keep peeling until you're satisfied with the look. Once I'm done peeling back the fringe, I'm going to measure from the lowest point on my stitching to where the fringe starts there, and I'm going to measure that from the top part of my stitching just so I can make sure that everything is nice and lined up, because I'm going to end up folding over the top portion of my banner here. So here I'm just marking that so that I can line myself up to be able to fold that. And I'm using a friction erasable gel pen, which means whenever I use a blow dryer or some heat source, these pen markings will disappear. Just a note, so if you're about to grab like a permanent pen, just letting you know this one's not permanent, so I'm going to get rid of those marks. So here you can see when I fold over my banner, this is how it will line up, and I'm simply going to go ahead and hot glue this down and in place. And since I used 2 layers of canvas fabric, I'm just going to repeat this once more to ensure that bottom layer stays in place as well. And at this point, I went ahead and took my blow dryer to those pen lines I made earlier, and it removed them completely. And now we're ready to make the tassels. Now to make the tassels, I just bought some yarn from Michaels that matched my canvas fabric. And I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly how many inches these were that I cut them to, but just cut them at a couple inches long. You can always shorten them up. And now what I've done is I've taken these little bits of yarn, and again we're peeling them like string cheese to make them into tinier strands that look more detailed and that'll look less yarny and more tassel-y. And once I have peeled all the strands, I'm just going to put them into a nice and even stack. Then I'm going to cut a piece of yarn and tie it into a knot to create a loop here. And your loop doesn't have to be big as our tassel is going to be quite small. So I'm just tying it in a knot and then I'm going to trim off the excess threads. Next, I'm taking all those threads that we peeled and I'm putting them inside of that little loop that we just created and folding it over the knot. So the knot should be hidden by all of those peeled threads, and this is what we should be looking like here. Now I'm going to grab one of my DMC embroidery floss colors that I used to stitch my pattern, and I'm going to make this little loop here. And I'm going to hold it in place with my thumb, and then I'm simply going to begin to wrap around the top portion of that tassel. And I'm basically just going to keep wrapping my floss around these threads until I'm happy with the amount I've added and I'm happy with the width that it has put on. When I'm done wrapping, I'm going to take my thread up through that loop we originally made, and then I'm going to pull on the tiny thread that has been sticking out this whole time so that that will pull the loop that was on top so that it's hidden by the portion that we just wrapped. And so that will kind of conceal that, and then all that's left to do is trim off that tail, and you will be left with your nice wrapped tassel that just needs a little trim. So here you can kind of customize it and choose to make your tassel however long or short you like. And here's our completed tassel. I think it's so cute. Now just onto the final assembly. Here I have a wooden dowel rod that I have stained and let dry. Now all I have to do is insert it into this little tunnel on the top of my banner, and then I'm going to slide my tassel onto the left side of my dowel rod, and then I'm going to take another piece of yarn, the same yarn I used for my tassel, and I'm just going to tie 2 knots around either side of the dowel rod to add a hanger to this banner. At this point we could call this project done. However, the back of my project was looking a little bit messy, and while realistically no one's going to be looking at the back, I did just want to go ahead and clean it up a bit. So I simply measured some soft felt to the back, I cut it, and then I lightly hot glued it on. You could also probably get away with stitching it on in a light white color to match the front of the fabric, but again, that's personal preference. So you choose how to finish it however you like, with a messy hoop butt or banner butt, I guess, or add a piece of felt to it. And here is the final product. I think it turned out so cute. Thank you guys so much for stitching with me. If you do end up making one of these banners yourself and you share it on Instagram, be sure to tag me at St. Rogers Street, as I would love to see it and I'd love to feature it on my page. If you are interested in more fun DIY projects, be sure to check out my channel, as I do have a whole playlist dedicated to that, and even one that would pair perfectly with this little name banner for a little one is these DIY hair clips. You can check that out if you're interested, and in the meantime, my friends, happy stitching.